I'm Susan Kacvinsky, your host of End of Life Rounds. This podcast is a space for exploring conversations about end of life care, support, and the human experience surrounding it. Through each episode, we aim to bring clarity, perspective, and a deeper understanding of what this stage of life can look like. End of Life Rounds is brought to you by Golden Gate Hospice Care, where care extends beyond medicine to support patients and families in a more thoughtful, human way. Today we're joined by Mark Greenberg, Executive Director of End of Life Choices California, which provides free and confidential support to Californians navigating their legal end-of-life options, including advanced care planning and medical aid in dying. Mark has spent his career in service to vulnerable communities, both as an attorney representing immigrant clients and through nonprofit leadership. I'm so glad you could join us today, Mark. Thank you so much. I think we should begin by you telling us a little bit about End of Life Care California and maybe even the history of it, how it came to be founded,
Sure.
and what its mission is.
So this is great timing. We are California's commemorating 10 years of having the End of Life Option Act, which legalized medical aid in dying for the state. That was passed in 2015 and enacted on June 9, 2016. So we just had the 10-year anniversary of that. So when the law was passed, there was a national organization that spearheaded the legislative effort in California and continued to go across the country. And they had a volunteer program within their departments. But then they moved on to focusing more on the legislative activity. And that created some of the volunteers who were working with them were like, we want to be able to fill this gap and support people who are choosing medical aid in dying. So End of Life Choices California was born in 2019. It was all volunteers. There was 4 women who were carrying around an Android phone. And it would literally hand it off to each other to take calls and support people. And then since then, we've been able to grow where we've got a little bit of staff right now. And we have over 100 volunteers across the state who are supporting people in their end of life choices.
Wow, that's so excellent and so necessary. Talk to me for a little bit about where people are, like how you reach out to people who are in need of this information, or because it seems to me like there's a whole vast number of people who would are at this crossroad and kind of don't know what to do.
Sure. Awareness raising and outreach is one of the hallmarks of our organization. We have a speakers program that people can contact us and request a speaker for their group, regardless of the size. We do a lot of work with hospices and medical systems to let them know that we're available to provide support for their patients. Again, it's all at no cost. And then the services that we provide include a warm line, an email support line that people can contact us and reach out, and to have, it can be anything that people are just getting started in the process. We get a lot of people who are calling my mom or dad, my spouse, receive the diagnosis, and we don't know where to start or what to do. But awareness raising is one of the really key points. There was a survey done actually by one of our board members a couple years ago, where they surveyed Californians age 60 and over, as well as Canadians who have the law and had the law about the same time that California had it. And only about 28% of Californians are even aware of the option that exists for them. So a lot of what we do is just, letting people know that this is an option. And part of what we do is letting people know about all of their options. So that can be anything from continuing medical treatment to stopping medical treatment, through hospice, palliative care, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, through if that is where people want to go.
Right. I was just with a client who was voluntarily stopping eating and drinking last week. It seems like there's this gap between the people who need information and the people who have information, and getting them, even to know fully what they can have in hospice, when they qualify for hospice, that there's help available for them. And it seems like so many people are navigating these difficult times um, by themselves when they could have a lot of help.
Yeah, and I mean, the awareness raising that we do trickles through the medical system or the medical providers, individual physicians, and to hospices. There's over 2,000 hospices in the state. We haven't been able to reach all of that, but we try to reach the larger ones at least and find out what their MAID policy is.
Right.
Uh, there is a requirement that hospices post their MAID policies on the website and provide that to clients. There's not an enforcement mechanism for that within the law, so that is sometimes a challenge to find that out.
Right.
Um, and and hospices are not required to provide the MAID service. They're not required to let people know about it. So depending on who the hospice is, who the ownership is, who the medical director is. There are gaps even within people who go to hospice. So that's a lot of what we're doing is doing a really focused outreach to hospices, letting them know about our services. And then there's also kind of the capitalist component too, is that you get a lot of calls and we get a lot of referrals. And a lot of people are looking for ones who will support MAID, VSED, other options, and that it might be to their advantage to include this among their options.
Right. I think one of the things that I imagine sometimes is the person receiving the diagnosis and understanding what they want and not knowing how to approach that conversation with their family or how to even open it. It's like, how do we talk about this?
Yeah. So I have my handy coffee mug here, which is elephant. And we often talk about having this conversation as the elephant in the room.
Right.
We know it's there, we know it's coming, but for whatever personal, cultural, other reasons, those conversations are often avoided until the very end. And when I talk to people or when we talk to people about having a presentation or talking about this issue, we really frame it as it's not really an issue, a conversation about dying. It's a conversation about planning.
Mm.
So it's really about having the choices available to you so that when the time comes that you become terminal, you might become incapacitated, that you have a clear guide as to what you want to have happen. And your family, physicians, your loved ones, whoever your support system and network is, that they are aware of that as well. So that's, really part of it. We have a pretty comprehensive website that is at lifechoicesca.org. And we have a number of prompts on there in the conversation. And it might not even be like, hey, I want to call a family meeting and let's have this conversation. It could be something more like, if you came to one of our presentations, hey, I went to this presentation and I was wondering, what do you think about that? Or it got me thinking about what I would want to have happen when that time comes. We could run into someone at a health fair and they pick up a brochure and say, like, I picked this up. What do you think? And little prompts like that. It could be a story that you read in the newspaper or a magazine or saw a TikTok of. And, just it doesn't have to be brought up as like, let's have a gathering and talk about it. Be like, hey, I saw this news story and what do you think? I mean, it could be, I'm worried about what might happen and I want to be prepared. Remember how someone in your family died and do you think they had a good death or did it
Right.
another way to go about it? So
Yeah.
having that conversation. Then we also talk about, don't forget about having the conversation with your medical team. A lot of physicians, when we're talking about awareness raising and outreach, it's often within your medical team. They may not be aware of it or they may not be as comfortable with it. And bringing that conversation to them and saying, like, what would you do if I wanted to have this option available to me? And gives you information as to whether to continue with that physician or at least know that you would potentially need to look elsewhere.
Right. I think that with advanced directives and things like that, like my GP brings it up and gives it to, her patients. And we want to talk about like what would happen if you were in that situation. But the conversation never goes further than you're on life support. What do you want people to do?
Mhm.
But I think it could go further. And I think probably it should go further. with
Yeah.
just that, your general checkup with your GP.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it may be something that I don't, that you have, you become incapacitated. It's all about kind of framing how your quality of life versus the quantity of time.
Right.
And on the California, there's a state form that people can find. It's on our website. You can search for it. That's your standard advanced healthcare directive form. And then there is an area where you can say add additional information that you have,
Mhm.
or additional guidance that you want to give. So that is something that people, you're not limited to the do not resuscitate, do not intubate. You can go beyond that.
Right.
That if I'm in X state, I want Y to happen.
Yeah. And I think one thing people could understand here is that you can't do like a voluntary cessation of eating and drinking or medical aid in dying un- unless you're mentally competent. There's like procedures that you have to be able to do it yourself. So it's not like someone can do it to you.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the eligibility requirements for medical aid at dying is being able having the mental capacity, and being able to self-administer. There might be a little bit more wiggle room with VSED,
Mm,
uh, as you're going through that. We talk to people about there's no law that says you have to eat. So when you can choose to make that choice. The thing about VSET, as you well know, is it takes a lot of family support. We talk to people if they're going to stop eating and drinking to make a video, write yourself a letter, so that when things become difficult, you are referred to that, and can push forward. There's also this thing of not having someone cooking in the house where you
right.
are. So there's things, and then there is, when we're talking about forms, there is a thing called the VSED directive that people can fill out as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of support, the woman that I was with last week
Yeah.
had a death doula, and she was with her, and her friends were with her, and we were singing to her, and there was a lot of support. And
Mhm.
she had just slipped into a coma, but the moments before the coma are when it's difficult, right? The moments of like the body kind of wanting a drink of water.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So there are things like lip swabs that you see
Right.
to
She had all of that.
ease discomfort. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's
yeah.
it's just not something you really should do by yourself. And I really think that all of end of life care is not something people should do by themselves necessarily. In so many communities in our overall death phobic culture, people still seem to think like they have to do things by themselves, but there's palliative care, there's hospice care, and then there's end of life choices that you can be supported in. Like people can have help.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone who's choosing to go down the MAID, the medical aid and dying option, that's one of the big differentiators in our organization is that we have volunteers who are comfortable, who are trained, who can come to your home on the day you're taking the medication, mix the medication, be with you, let you and the family know what the process is in terms of falling asleep, falling into a coma. There might be some agonal breathing along the way. There might be some vomiting. These things are, normal, not unusual.
Mhm.
Uh, and that, is prepared. Again, it's the planning part of it and knowing what to expect and what's ahead, that can ease the stress and anxiety going forward.
Right. I have a friend who volunteers with End of Life Choices California, and she is also a working death doula. So she's quite knowledgeable.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fantastic having, the end of life doulas who are working with us and volunteering. They bring a lot of skills and the kind of the empathy and support that is part of the ethos of being in this field and this work.
Yeah, and I also think that that people who are working in end of life care, like are voluntarily going into these situations, have a depth of soul and spirit that we often in this like really science-based culture don't like to talk about. But I think it's really a presence and a just a depth of compassion that people have that makes such a difference
Yeah,
being there for
yeah.
people. Yeah,
And
that kind of help.
and it's being able to take the lead from the patient, from the client. And there was one death that I attended where the gentleman were he was like, okay, let's go,
Yeah.
let's start it. And then some people want to share stories and sing songs and do that. And it's just, our we have a motto with our organization. It's your life, your death, your choice.
Right.
Extends through the whole process.
Right. I also knew a man who did that with his family, had the whole dinner and the whole night, and like basically had his own memorial service. But the day of, he did not want them there.
Mhm.
He just him and the person helping him. That's all he wanted. So, you can really make it your own.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really beautiful about being able to plan this. And if that's the direction that you want to go, you can have that last meal. You can have there's some good films and shows about this. There's a movie called Last Flight Home.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
Very good.
I mean, that combines a spiritual component because one of the daughters was a rabbi or is a rabbi. One's a documentary filmmaker, and that was done when California had a 15-day waiting period between the acts of being able to receive the medication, because there was this whole like interregnum of time where they're waiting to be able to get the medication. Jack Has a Plan is another movie that tells a good story. A younger guy dealing with friends, more, along with family. And then on Amazon and now on YouTube, there's a series called Take Me Out Feet First, which follows the lives of people who have chosen that option and goes through their process.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier a good death, and I think there's so much in those three words, a good death. Like you could write a whole book about what is a good death, and people are afraid to even talk about it. But my experience is that once we start talking about it or we accept the thing that's inevitable, what follows after is relief and something that feels like hope.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Even in my role, if I'm just talking to people who are, in my role with the organization, talking to people about the organization, it just opens up a world where people are, you bring someone to them who's comfortable talking about death, and it gives them the permission structure or the freedom to start sharing their stories. And it really gets things started for them to start. I mean, it's something that people are probably considering internally, but don't have the outlet to be able to talk to.
Sometimes for a long time, people
Yeah.
are considering these things internally, but they're afraid what will happen in other people if they start talking about it. But
Right.
my experience is what happens is that people acknowledge. You'd think this would be simple because we all know we're going to die, but it's not simple. People acknowledge that they're going to die. Everything changes. The way you live changes. The way you talk to other people changes. The way you appreciate the next breath changes. I mean, it changes everything to become willing to talk about it, whether you're facing a diagnosis or not. It's amazing how much accepting our own death changes everything.
Yeah, and I mean, we just have a team that is just so comfortable with this issue and topic to go with the depth of knowledge about who provides these services, what support is available, what the steps are for all the different processes or choices that are out there. And it's just, it's really something that's not widely available or widely talked about. And sometimes we get into a little bit of a bubble of people who are comfortable talking about that,
Right.
talking about making these plans. But out there in the world among the other, X number of million people in California, it's something new and uncomfortable potentially. And creating these pathways to have these conversations is really one of the things that we can do.
Right, because there are many people out there still withholding diagnoses from people from, like, even telling them that they have terminal cancer or whatever's going on in their body, that it's somehow better for the patient to not know that is happening, and
Yeah.
we still have a lot of that.
No,
Um
and we have just around the medical aid in dying issues that, we have some people whose spouse may have chosen that path, but didn't want other people to know.
Right.
And that becomes, a whole other burden. And
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons it compelled us to start a bereavement program specifically for people just who had utilized MAID, because it is a different kind of death that is not as familiar in society. So there's a lot of great bereavement support and programs out there for dealing with the death of a loved one. But with a MAID death, that can be something a little bit different. And it's nice to have a cohort of people that you can talk to about that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I didn't know you offered that service, and I felt like I'd been all over your website, but your website is deep. I mean, there's so much there. There's so much available.
Yeah, we try to break it out so that you can find it. We just did a website relaunch and added a search bar. So,
Mm,
but
mm.
I definitely know that if my bereavement coordinator watches this, she will definitely be like, "You need to highlight our bereavement program."
As well you should, and it seems to me too that the bereavement process starts before the bereavement.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this, but
Mhm.
anticipatory grief is something that we talk about, and having the plan in place. Well, it's interesting. One of the things within our bereavement program is that people who have come through us and received our support throughout the process are less likely to need or want to be part of the bereavement program because they've been able to deal with it leading
Right.
up to the process. Some of the people who are kind of doing it on their own are, it's a little bit of a shell shock and need that extra support or want that extra support and conversation.
Right, I can imagine it'd be quite a surprise that somebody decided to do this and didn't tell you. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Um, is is there a way that I don't know how to like, get to this place in the culture that we are less fearful of death, that we can talk about it more, um, and that we could integrate, like, palliative care, hospice care, medical aid in dying, like, just for everybody to know how to access services.
Yeah. Well, when you figure it out, let me know.
I know,
Uh,
because it's one of the things that comes up all the time in hospice care is that even the doctors in palliative care don't seem to understand how much is available for patients going into hospice.
yeah. And this is also somewhere where cultural gaps and other barriers might come up. I was having a conversation with a couple of members of the Vietnamese community
Mhm.
the other day. And one just interesting note is that there is no Vietnamese term for hospice, um, for example. And
Mhm.
so then you're creating you have to get over that hurdle first before
Mhm.
talking to people. And it's one of the things that when people call us, one of the first questions that we ask is like, are you enrolled in hospice? If you have that terminal diagnosis already, and we absolutely recommend that people do that because of the services, the support services that are surrounding it.
Right, right. I wish that more palliative care doctors did the same. Just ask the question, "Are you enrolled in hospice?"
Yeah.
I think it's interesting culturally that the Vietnamese language doesn't have a word for hospice care, and what it says to me is that traditionally that kind of care has always been done at home
Mhm.
and probably by the elder women of the family.
Yeah.
And it brings me back again to that idea of what is a good death. Like,
Mhm.
we seem to have a belief in this culture that if you can do it, you should.
Mhm.
So whatever next thing we can try, um, you should try it just because we can, and you never know, and maybe something will happen. But a lot of times, what ends up happening is that the quality of life is so diminished that people end up kind of not enjoying the extra month or whatever it was that they bought with all this suffering.
Right. And that's where, social media and conversations in the culture can have an impact. The Pit, for example, has brought these issues up. A TV show on HBO. And, that is something that when you're, I don't know, to use the term, when you're talking to civilians out there who are not, you know, you know, um, that's something that can resonate, in terms of, a parent going in and having an advanced care directive that says they don't want to be intubated, but then falling to the children. And then there's a dispute and debate among the children that delays the inevitable for him, but ultimately coming to the right choice, or the choice that he wanted, for example. Those are things that can make an impact. And, that's why, when you started this in terms of having the conversation, it's like use those cues,
Right.
and the thing is that, the people watching this, it's kind of a self-selecting audience,
It is.
people
It
who
is.
know about this. And, so when we're talking to people who are not choosing necessarily to engage in the conversation, but the conversation is coming to them, is to just leave the doors open, to ask open-ended questions or bring it up in the context to be able to have a conversation.
Right. I love all these cultural references you are so familiar with. It reminded me of an episode of The Pit where a person had an advance directive that said do not intubate, and they weren't conscious anymore, and the medical staff did not want to intubate because they had the directive. Plus, they knew what intubated people go through much
Right.
better than the family did.
Right.
And there was one adult child that wanted to follow the directive and one adult child that didn't want to follow it. And it delayed for hours and hours what could happen in the room.
Right, right. And then in season 2, there was a woman who was on hospice and had a death doula with
Mhm.
her.
It was brilliant, that
But
episode.
yeah, it was really well done. And then ultimately, she was like, I don't want a hospital bed in the home where the kids will see it. I don't want this burden. And I've been fighting this pain that I haven't told you about for months. It's time.
Right.
And that's just something that culturally, societally is more difficult to accept, but something that if we can bring it into the conversation, then that makes things better for everybody.
I'll tell you one of the things that gives me great hope about this was I sing in a threshold choir as well. And we had a rehearsal this week, and two new people, young people in their late 20s, and one of them was a man. So it's like a young man who's trained as a death doula coming to sing at bedside. I was just like, okay, things are shifting in the culture if this is the case. And younger people are more and more often I see younger people
Mhm,
working as doulas and working in end of life care.
mhm.
There's a depth they come from and a willingness that I certainly didn't have when I was in my 20s. It's a beautiful thing to see. So let's talk about volunteering now on
Sure.
that note, because I do see a lot more people getting involved and being willing to like walk right up to the thing, the most terrifying thing, which is our fear of death.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been able to grow our volunteer base over the years to now where I said we have over 100, in the state. Some
Mhm.
of them are doing bedside support, some of them are answering our phones, some of them are doing witnessing, some are doing presentations, and some are, kind of involved in doing, soft outreach or acting as ambassadors within their communities. The one of the things from our need standpoint is people in rural communities. We have a
Yeah.
strong in the metropolitan areas. So and that's an area too where you might only have like one hospice or the physicians aren't aware of the issue. And so people who in, underserved communities, and that includes rural communities, as well as, minority communities, as well, because when you look at the statistics around medical aid and dying in particular, There were about 1,500 prescriptions written in 2024, which is the last year we have stats for. 2025 stats will be coming out shortly. Um, about 86% of the prescriptions written were to white people.
Right. Probably educated white people.
Yeah, and I think it's 70%, over 70% had some college up through an advanced degree. So, those are the people who are aware of it. Now, there may be, cultural, religious, or other reasons why, particular communities are not as interested in it. But it's also something about a conversation that should be had, whether or not you want to choose medical aid in dying or not, about continuing medical care, informing about palliative care, informing about hospice care. So, that's one of the things from we're always happy to have additional volunteers to our team. Our greater need now is people with multiple language skills and people in underserved communities.
Yes, yeah, it's the greatest need in hospice too, in general, is reaching out to people in underserved communities, and people who are like at county hospitals or have been like below the poverty line all of their lives, like understanding their rights and what's available to them.
Yeah, and because it is a kind of a Caucasian dominated field in a lot of ways, that's where the need for, trusted sources within the community are so valuable because, it's less likely, more likely to be trusted if they're hearing it from within the community.
Right.
And so that's, that's, it's a brave act and it's a necessary act in terms of expanding access to all the options that are available.
So once we're looking at all these options as a family that may not be totally comfortable with these ideas, what are some of the questions that people bring up, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's it spans the spectrum. Some people are calling like, "What are my options? I didn't realize California had the law. I thought I'd have to go to Oregon if I wanted to do this. What do you mean I can tell my doctor I don't want to continue this medication? Is that allowed? Yes, it's allowed. You are not required to take all the medical treatment that it may be, being offered to you. Um, the is it going to hurt? Is there, what will my family think? What will my spiritual leader think? There's a lot of, misconceptions out there. One of the misconceptions is that using medical aid in dying is suicide. This field is kind of a mix between the political, legal, and medical. So
Mhm.
from the legal perspective, it is not considered suicide on your death certificate. It goes down as your under cause. Um, and then there's, the fears of, that people have about, engaging in the conversation, feeling like they might be letting family down. There's a lot of concerns. And again, it begins with the discomfort with having the conversation to begin with.
So how does all this kind of shape the way you approach uh, these conversations, the dignity and autonomy at the end of life? How would someone like approach a conversation or open one, I guess?
Yeah, I'll start with talking to your medical team. I mean, that's, you're going for an appointment, you're paying them, you're the consumer. And it's that's if you're uncomfortable having and it can be intimidating. You go into the doctor's office, you might be in a gown, you're, in an unusual environment. What we tell people is that if we're going to have the conversation, and one of the volunteers on our staff is a retired physician, and he had never had the conversation with his team, and he talked about it. And, a couple of suggestions that he had were, when you're going before you go when you make the appointment or you go into the appointment, let them know that this is an issue that you want to talk about. Bring a person with you, to help follow up or see that you don't, pass on bringing up the subject, or that you're feeling rushed or something. So
Mhm.
those are, that's one avenue, because you're actually doing a service not just for yourself in terms of finding, you're doing it that cascades down, because now the physician is aware of the issue that they may not have been aware of, and it becomes kind of a trend. If one person asks about it, that's a coincidence. If two do it or three do it, it's a trend. The more people that are bringing this up, that's how it starts getting integrated into the medical field. And that's grassroots work. That's doing the ground up support.
Yes. Sounds like political action to me. Yeah. I think one of the points you bring up that's really important to highlight is this relationship with the physician, and that earlier decades, centuries, the doctor was like God, untouchable, and you didn't say things to them. You didn't, talking about shows and Call the Midwife, you can see it. That the doctors come in, they stand there in their white coats, and they talk about the patient like they're not in the bed, and you're not allowed to question. And I think we still carry some of that, like they're an authority, and you just listen, you don't talk.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that still isn't shifted enough, that doctors are partners in your healthcare, but you are making the decisions.
Right.
Like they're presenting options to you instead of telling you this is what has to happen. And I think a lot of doctors are still saying, well, what we do next is this, this, and this, without ever saying, do you want this? Like, here's what's going to happen. Here's how you're going to feel probably. And here's what's going to be the outcome likely.
That's great language to use, is that if you consider your physician as a partner in your medical care rather than the overseer of your medical care. And that if you just have that little bit of a perspective shift, that could change how you're approaching things and how you're, approaching the care that you want. So I think that's a great point.
Right. That you can be in charge of your own care.
Yeah.
And you can also ask for things to be explained to you in non-medical jargon.
Yeah.
That, it's okay to go, I don't understand a word you said.
Right. I mean, even, if I'm talking and I say "V said," so, not everyone knows what that means. Or if I say "me,"
right. That's right.
I
I feel like I need a little button that says, I don't speak acronym.
Right.
Please spell it out for me. What are you talking about? Yeah. Because in medical and education and all these places, it's just so jargon dependent. That if you didn't go to school in that jargon, you don't speak that language.
Right. Yeah. And that, you're trying to catch up and figure out what the acronym means.
Right.
And missing what's coming next.
Exactly. Because your brain's up here going, what? And I think that if you come from a marginalized community, say English isn't your first language, that's times 10.
Yes.
Because now not only are you thinking about that, but you're also thinking about, and what is that in English? How does that go in my language?
Right.
So it's a lot.
And that's the beginning. When you talk about beginning the conversation, it may not be about what you want or your choice. And it's more framed of, we talk to people about reviewing your advanced care plan. First of all, that if you don't have an advanced care plan, to do one, to get one. And then once you have it, review it. There's another acronym for at certain times, if there's a marriage, divorce, a change of circumstances, to review it. But in any case, you should do it every 3 years or so, every 2 to 3 years. Like if you're reviewing your estate plan, lawyers will tell you to review it every couple of years. So that's something, and that's also can be a conversation opener, is that, or the doctor suggested a pulse. What's a pulse? Physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. That's the pink sheet that people may or may not be familiar with. But that's another thing that, a way to engage in the conversation, or just put a pink sheet on your refrigerator and see what your family says when they see it up there.
My husband's nurse put a pink sheet on our refrigerator, and I had to take it down after a while. Couldn't look at it anymore. It's quite pink.
Yeah.
And it's a big reminder.
That's what it's there for. I mean, that's, for people who aren't familiar, the pulse is something. So if emergency personnel are called to your house, apartment, wherever you are, and you are unable to speak for yourself, they are trained to look for this pink sheet to see, is it do not resuscitate? Is it do not intubate, and make so that you're not getting care that you don't want necessarily. You may want all life-sustaining treatment, and that is your choice. But that is the default. So if you don't want that, that's where a pulse becomes even more important.
Yes, it's such an important thing to have the information. The first time he got in trouble, then the paramedics came and he couldn't speak with them coherently, they turned and looked at me and said, "What medications is he on?" And I went, "He doesn't tell me." And the guy looked at me and he said, "You don't know what medications your husband is on?" And I was like, no, I don't know." So Pink's thing on the refrigerator, boom, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. And who can think of it? Because it's a list and they're all words that are unfamiliar to you, because who knows what those medication names are.
Right.
It's good for many, many things. Wonderful. Any parting shots? Anything you'd like to say before we close the conversation?
No, I think the audience listening to this, if it's something that you're interested in learning more about, to look at our website or volunteering. If you're engaged or work with the hospice, we do quarterly webinars specifically for hospice staff and volunteers to let them know, one, about the law, what are the eligibility requirements, which I'll just tip off really quickly here. One is an adult, 18 or up, resident of California. If you're not currently living here, you can move here and establish residency relatively quickly. That you have a terminal diagnosis with a life expectancy of 6 months or less. That is subjective. That you have the mental capacity to make medical decisions, and that you have the ability to self-administer the medication. And that can be through 3 ways. Most people take it orally. It's a compounded medication that you mix with some, apple juice or something, a small amount that you drink. But if you're unable to drink or swallow, you have the option of administering it through a feeding tube or through a rectal catheter, where the patient, the client to us, needs to depress the syringe to engage the medication. So those are the requirements. And we just want people to know what their options are and be able to have the knowledge, the information to be able to make the choice that they want. And that's one of the things where hospice comes in a lot, because they're dealing with people with that diagnosis, and encourage them to, certainly if people bring it up, to engage them in that conversation and let them know what the options are, and that there is support if the hospice is unable to do it, and that our organization, End of Life Choices California, is available to be there to help support the clients on the day they take the medication.
Right. Thank you so much. I think information is the whole thing, like just changing the culture.
Appreciate your work and what you're doing.
Oh, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Thank you for coming today.